integration is the process of creating a spiritual safety net for yourself to be able to engage with these medicines in a way that is supported. And the part that is often forgotten is the fact that we are not doing this in isolation. We are doing this in community. And we all need that. And I think COVID taught us that really profoundly in the isolation and the lockdown, that we need each other. We are interdependent, hopefully not codependent, but interdependent with each other. And that we need touch, and we need to witness other people's vulnerability to make it okay for us to be vulnerable. The softness of femininity, or the fortitude of accountability and community, and all of these different pieces that we only get when we see ourselves reflected in others.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another conversation on the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. I have with me Skye Weaver today, and we're going to deep dive into the cannabis work and all kinds of integration, healing, and space holding, and also women's circle and everything that comes with it. So I just want to say welcome, Skye. So amazing to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Nice to meet you.
And you, and just for context, to give a context to our listeners, I would like to say, I would like to read some of your bio, and then we can dive into the conversation afterwards, if that's okay. Yeah. So you are a mentor, teacher, consultant, facilitator, and public speaker whose work focuses on who we are being in the process of whatever it is that we are doing. I like that. So we'll probably dive into that as well. And you are facilitator with Medicinal Mindfulness, resident facilitator at DoubleBlind Magazine, and founder of UnDone, a ceremonial container for women's leadership. And you have MFA from Harvard and trained at the Hakomi Institute, and is a certified in mindfulness-based psychedelic therapy from the Center of Medicinal Mindfulness. And you are also a certified yoga teacher, Reiki Master, trained bodyworker, and Alexander practitioner. That's amazing. Traditionally, we always talk about your background and how, what made you come into this space. And yeah, how did you come into the space of working with the medicines?
First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be here and inviting me on. And also just to name, I'm at my parents' place for the holidays, and today is yard work day, I guess, in their neighborhood. So apologies for any background noise. Yeah, how did I come into psychedelics and be a part of the Renaissance? It's been a ride. I started off as an actress. I grew up dancing and acting and performing, and that was my life. That was my passion. That's what I wanted to do with my life, was perform. And I even got my master's from Harvard in acting, my MFA, and graduated in 2009 and moved to LA and found a medicine community pretty quickly. Just at like a friend invited me to a potluck, and then here is this entire community of people, and I was like, who are these amazing humans? It's kind of like when Harry met Sally, like, I'll have what she's having. And I, for the first time, I saw people like modeling consciousness for me. And there was something about their way of being that was really captivating and inspiring. And I was just like, yes, please, more, please, like this. What is this? And so I dove into this work and quickly started to understand that the reason I was acting and performing was from this wound of wanting to be seen and recognized and heard and appreciated. My father was my favorite person when I was a kid, and he was sitting at home working on his PhD, and I wasn't allowed to interrupt him. And the only way I could get his attention, right, was to perform or say something clever or be cute. And so that became who I needed to be in order to receive the kind of love that my soul needed. And so within the medicine work, in starting to identify that kind of paradigm or that structure that I had created for myself, really realizing that, wait, there's so much more than this performative nature, and starting to unpack all of that, moving into deeper work, sitting with ayahuasca work, and receiving these messages of, you're here to serve, you're here to be of service, and this imposter syndrome, or this doubt that was in me, like, who am I? Who am I to serve? Who am I to want to facilitate? And so really took on this personal work, this personal path of, like, who do I need to be in order to carry medicine? And what does that look like? Who do I need to be in order to do that? Right. And if we focus on the beingness, by its nature, it starts to change the doing in our lives. So yoga teacher training, and I was already doing body work and Reiki attunement, right? So these, like, different steps and modalities that really called to me, and really just listening to what my soul was really called to, and whatever my yes was, I followed that, and I just dove into that for a while, and really realized, after a poorly held container, my first time doing 5-MeO-DMT, that my body was injured. When I came out of the experience, he was telling me to stop yelling, which was very jarring, and then came on to me about half an hour later. And so really looking at integrity and ethics and right relationship, right? This was somebody who had, like, done 5-MeO and then bought a bunch of it and started serving, and understanding, wait, there's a path, there's lineage, there's teachings. And so really wanting to make sure that I was walking the path in right relationship with these medicines, and learning about psychotherapy, psychedelic therapy, somatic therapy, and staying within my scope, while continuing to expand it. So that's been my path, and it's been so rewarding, and I feel proud of where I'm at, and the work that I'm doing, and the people that I get to be of service to, myself being first on that list. So yeah.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. You touched on a very, very important topic, actually, and if you don't mind, we can kind of go towards this a little bit. So we're dealing with this issue of integrity, I think, in the space of the psychedelic serving. What are your thoughts on, because, we also have these conversations in my circles about who should be serving, like who is good enough, or who could carry, like, as you said as well, who do they need to be, or the person who is trying to be a facilitator in this space, who do they need to become in order to be serving this medicine? And do you think that having an education, either psychotherapy, maybe a body work, Reiki, energy working, body attunement, all these kind of modalities. Do you see that as the integral part? Because, especially psychotherapy. I mean, if you look at, I know this doesn't mean much ultimately, because it's again down to the person and their ethics and their probably the outlook towards the world and their desires and the motives, I guess. But just kind of trying to come from an angle where definitely is wrong for a person to not having any of these understanding the body and the mind and the psyche, how the human functioning works, and then just because they have their own experience, buying the equipment and then going ahead and serving. So that's definitely really like probably the most unethical way of doing this. But what are your thoughts on that? Like modalities, training, that kind of goes hand in hand, maybe just to support this process, would be maybe like a harm reduction approach, or like, what are your thoughts? Like, I'm sure you guys also have these kind of conversations as well around, sort of circles.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. I mean, you wouldn't go to a therapist that didn't go to school and study therapy and then have their 3,000 hours of supervision that they have to do before they're certified to be a therapist. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I have trained as a therapist in somatic therapy with Hakomi. It's a 2-year program. And then I've trained with medicinal mindfulness with Daniel McQueen, who I know you've had on the show in the past as well, and help teach those trainings now too, for mindfulness-based psychedelic therapy. And yet you look at a shaman and they don't have any, clinical therapeutic background, but they do have a lineage, right? There's a teaching, there's time spent, right? My mom calls it paying your dues. And right, there's a process and there's a mentorship. Just like the yogis, somebody has to learn from somebody. We're not necessarily reinventing the wheel here. We're standing on the shoulders of giants who've come before us. And for me, the danger is, oh, I did this, I sat with ayahuasca once, the medicine told me I'm a shaman, and so I'm gonna order some medicine online and start facilitating to my friends. And that's the kind of leaky container that can cause harm. So like you were saying, this harm reduction, how do we minimize harm within a medicine context? And it can look a lot of different ways, and everybody has a different path. And some people, we're slowing them down, being like, okay, good. I'm glad you've taken this one training, or I'm glad you've sat in ceremony this once, and maybe get a couple of other modalities under your belt before you start facilitating this medicine. And some people, like me, who kind of had years and years of being a guardian in ayahuasca ceremonies and body work and energy work and yoga and really, for me, I really felt like I have a natural gift because of my early childhood trauma. In order to survive, I had to attune to the people around me. And that was so that I could, navigate everybody else. And now, of course, because of the medicine work, when we have a wound that we heal, it becomes our superpower. And so now my ability to step into a room and into a space and attune to the room, right? What used to be hypervigilance is now a beautiful, unique skill set that maybe not everybody has. So I think every person's path is different. Every teacher, every mentor, every modality is different. And I think if we, again, stay within our scope while continuing education, right? Like all the therapists have to do continuing education credits, stay within our scope while expanding it through trainings or sitting in other people's ceremonies or whatever that might look like, that we each have a calling or a unique path with unique skill sets to be in integrity, like you said, and to again, this piece of like right relationship. How are we utilizing these tools? Because even psychedelics are a tool, right? And to me, if we zoom back and we look at the bigger picture, really we're in the process of expanding consciousness and navigating that. And I like to say many paths, one mountain, right? And psychedelics is one of those paths and one of those tools in that process. And so being in the inquiry, staying curious, continually being the observer and practicing like compassionate self-inquiry. Sometimes we get too big too fast and we need to take a break. And I went through that too. I'm just back from a year-long spiritual sabbatical because of health issues that came up in my body that were screaming for me to slow down and pay attention. And so I stepped back from all of the doing and the trainings and the teaching and the coaching and allowed myself to turn inward. And that process, along with understanding that I needed support and actually went through surgery 9 months ago, has actually transformed me and therefore my offerings and who I choose to work with and how I be in the process and kind of the lens that I see this work through. And that, again, it's not just about the psychedelics, it's the community around it. Like, where is the community outside of ceremony? You know,
Yeah.
and how do we begin to normalize and cultivate containers that aren't just about the medicine, but is about the preparation and the integration and the navigation and the arc of experience, you know, that mentorship that so many of us seek. I know I have been and have had so many beautiful mentors along my path, and and sometimes those containers I can see, maybe he closed ceremony a bit abruptly and I'm going to do it a different way. Or maybe this person is facilitating in a way or with people that maybe I don't resonate with anymore. So instead of complaining about other people's containers, starting to really identify what kind of container I wish to see in the world and start to bring that forward.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So this is like a kind of acknowledging that this is a progressive process and there is no end goal. We don't just arrive at a place of like, this is it. I have arrived, I'm the facilitator, and that's it. From here onwards, this is how it's going to be.
Just certificate,
Yeah. Just kind of staying in the inquiry and the continuous training, continuous the realization of this is a progressive, evolutionary, progressively sort of like it has its own path that we just kind of step in and it just kind of trusting and doing everything in our, capacity to stay in integrity and continually training, learning. And of course, one of our guests, actually, she said, which I really loved, she said, my offerings change as I change, as I grow, and as I become a mature advocate for the psychedelic medicines. I think that's just so spot on because, we change, nothing stays the same. And of course, the offerings change, the way we see things change. So just coming back to earlier, what we said about the incredible, the critical importance of having other modalities to support the medicine. It's almost like not putting the medicine in the center, but having all of those foundational, modalities and experiences and training, and then the medicine. Like it's the second thing that we bring in. It's not the actual center of everything, but I think this is the psychedelic space that we're seeing growing a lot. It is just making that medicine as the panacea is the one that everything revolves around, rather than the other way around. So I feel like this is the future, acceptance of how they are used and how we can bring it into the West, especially in the West. I think, like you said, if we don't have the lineage, a shaman or an indigenous person, medicine facilitator, they usually have their own lineage container, a community. It's like, I remember when I first began my foundational work, there was this, a medicine carrier from the native lands, the Peru, and she's really smart. She was really could see and observe what was going on in the West. And I remember once I asked, what is the biggest challenge for you to work with the Western people? And she said, they are isolated and they don't understand integration. And also they want to fix everything really fast. Mm-hmm. And she said, in Peru, like these medicines are there for our lifetime. Like we don't go to it when we in desperate situations. They are there, we just use them as, things happen. Like, there's illness, there is a, death, rebirth, festivals, celebration, offerings, whatever it is. It's just kind of like weaved into the culture. So it's not like we leave everything to go and do this and then come back to the norm. So yeah, it's it was a struggle in the beginning. And that kind of, like you said, having these amazing mentors made me realize very early on how important it was to be educated in this. And also that we need to be so careful. How do we talk about it? Because, an impressionable person who's in a really stressful situation can just jump in, like you said, finding a facilitator just because of desperation, and then end up in a real bad situation. So there are so many things that, we can bring in and talk about and sort of unravel all these things. But ultimately, what I'm hearing from you is that community. Also, my favorite is accountability, because when we are in a community, there is an accountability, right? There is people overseeing you and they are kind of watching and witnessing you, and which kind of helps them just kind of going off doing your own thing. So there is a accountability there. There is some sort of code of ethics where that they will hopefully authentically kind of stir you in the right direction. So that's why I'm also really super passionate about communities, and I would love you to talk about. I know you're offering this now, and I know you're going to be, I love what you said about creating the thing that you actually needed, and bringing that change to the world. If you please could speak to about the community aspect of the medicine work, I think that would be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much conversation around medicine, and now the big buzz thing is integration. And integration really is actually preparation, navigation, integration, right? It's not just, oh, I took this medicine, now what? Integration is the process of creating a spiritual safety net for yourself to be able to engage with these medicines in a way that is supported. And the part that is often forgotten is the fact that we are not doing this in isolation. We are doing this in community. And there's a lot around the therapeutic model now, which is a therapist and a participant, right? One-on-one, maybe two therapists and a participant. But where even in that model, because it's this ancient technology within a modern context of Western medicine, they're missing, the part around community and the normalizing our experience. We all need that. And I think COVID taught us that really profoundly in the isolation and the lockdown, that we need each other. We are interdependent, hopefully not codependent, but interdependent with each other, and that we need touch, and we need to witness other people's vulnerability to make it okay for us to be vulnerable, and witness other people's power to make it okay for us to be powerful. The softness of femininity, or the fortitude of accountability and community, and all of these different pieces that we only get when we see ourselves reflected in others. And hopefully, the point of the medicine work is that eventually, we become the medicine and our life becomes the ceremony. And there is no difference other than, okay, I'm going into a ceremonial context. And I even therapeutically, when I work with clients, it's all within a ceremonial context. I know some people prefer for it to be just a bit more clinical or a bit more exploratory. But for me, and how I have found my path in relating to these medicines, it's always been through this ceremonial context, which can be as simple as saying thank you. Instead of being that consumer, where we buy the mushrooms from somebody and then we consume them and have this experience, and it's this like solo journey, which is beautiful. The idea of then what do you do with this, right? Becomes something that can be modeled for us in the world around us when we are able to surround ourselves with people who are walking this path, who are doing this work, who are committed to staying awake and being aware and being a witness to their own lives and their own stories, as well as maybe eventually supporting that process for other people. So yeah, community is essential. And yeah, I can't say enough about it.
Yeah. And your passion around creating women's circle, or creating like especially container for women, how did that come about, and how was that kind of birthed into your current work, into your work now?
Yeah. I grew up pretty distant from my femininity, and had some early childhood abuse that required me. My young mind decided that the way to deal with that was to dissociate and to numb out. And so disconnecting from my body, disconnecting from my femininity, my attractiveness, my sexiness, my embodiment, really. And though I grew up as a dancer and an actor, it felt like almost an outside in process, right? It was like, oh, I need to go to this acting class or take this dance class, and the connectivity to my soul was missing, because it was so performative, and there was something inside of me that felt empty, and also very unfulfilled. I have a master's in being other people from Harvard, and the medicine work has been a master's in being myself. And it's a continual process, lifelong process. I'm a lifelong student, and this process of forgetting myself and only being of service to other people, or literally taking on the lifestyle or the words or the blocking or the songs or the choreography of other people, and being celebrated for being other people, was again almost a dissociative process. And the medicine, of course, started to teach me that was happening. But there was a part of me that was always supporting other people's visions to help them come to fruition. And in that process, I learned a lot. Those were my mentors. And being able to step in and support and see how other people were living, or had structured their business, or were doing production on things, or were hosting ceremonies. I was still entering other people's containers. And this health opportunity, it's not a midlife crisis, it's a midlife opportunity. This opportunity showed up in my body about 3.5 years ago, where they found what they thought was a cyst on my right ovary. And in doing the work around this, understanding that the ovary, right, it's the place that creates our eggs, it's our flower that produces our seeds, and that spiritually, that there was something about who I was being, right, being of service to everyone else and forgetting about myself. So this opportunity, I said, I'm not opposed to surgery, but I don't want to rush into it until I learn what it's here to teach me. And so I did a womb dieta in a cabin in Big Bear for a month, and did full dieta process for a month, and cleaned up the diet and turned off all my technology and just met once a week with my facilitator. And connected to my body, and found my inner child hiding inside of this cyst, this part of me that wanted to be free and create, and really the liberation that was possible in reclaiming this part of me, and learning how to say no, and creating healthy boundaries, and understanding that I needed this time with me in order to reclaim my body, and my creativity, and my sensuality, and my womanhood, and really actually realizing for the first time that I was numb. And the Gene Keys talks about, like, the very first shadow of the first gene key is numbness, and realizing that numbness is a feeling. It's the feeling of numbness, and that everything's possible from there. And so this process of reconnecting with myself, with my womb, with my body, with my creativity, with my alone time, right? COVID taught that to me as well. Instead of going out and doing and training and all the things, I was at home and I was connecting. And so this process has really reinvented me, to be able to take all of these modalities and trainings that I've had, and these experiences, and this quality that I have in ceremony, and the ability to hold space, and now from this context of this embodiment of this connectivity, of this femininity, and of a permission to be all of me, and a real focus and commitment and intention, for all of me to be present in what it is that I in every moment that I show up for. So whether it be a podcast or teaching for EntheoNation, I try to pour all of myself into it. And so this process of eventually needing surgery to remove that right ovary, that actually ended up not being a cyst, but the ovary itself that got inflamed and enlarged, from having stored so much story and emotions and repression into this space. And now all of the space that's been created and the vitality and the inspiration that's been released from understanding that I needed support and seeking it and committing to it. And now this idea of ceremony, of femininity, working with women and people who identify, female identified people as well, to come back to ourselves, to slow down in this crazy busy world. And instead of it being, my offerings being just another course you have to show up for, what if what is created is actually a place of regenerative nourishment, where we come together and we support each other in sisterhood, in the medicine space, with ceremony, but also counsel, group coaching, education pieces, integration work, ceremony, as well as time off. So this offering that I have right now is called UnDone, and we do all of our work within the first 2 weeks of the month, and then we take the rest of the month off for spaciousness, for integration, to go out into the world, into the default world, and experience, and then be able to bring all of our work together out into the world, and then bring all of our worldly experience back into circle when we meet the next month. This idea of like breathing, and even calling them exhales for our group share, and inhales for our education, and above for ceremony, and below for integration, and being able to work together in community with a committed group of women or female identified people, to do this work together, and know that we don't have to do it alone, and find that repair that's possible amongst women when we stop competing with each other, which is what I used to do in acting. I'd show up at an audition to a room full of people who looked like me, for the same part. And instead, how do we actually welcome every single one of those people into this space, and witness their path and their arc of experience through life. That's why I made it a 6-month journey instead of 1 or 3. It felt like that time frame, that experience, that arc really gives an opportunity for people to grow and learn together, and even build something from that, when we know ourselves and we know how to connect to ourselves and listen for our inherent truth that comes up when we create a still, quiet space, and we can listen to what emerges. Imagine what's possible when we aren't just trying to like do and make a list and let me put something out there because I think I need to, versus let me sit and be with myself and connect and breathe and listen to what wants to emerge. So really taking all of these different modalities and somatic work and medicine work, and synthesizing this container for transformation that I hope will be very, very potent. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it again reinforces the power of being in a group, I guess, in a community, as always.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of go towards the cannabis work as well, because that's really interesting, really fascinating. I know I spoke to Daniel as well. For our listeners, Daniel McQueen, he's been on the podcast as well, and he's one of the facilitators that said cannabis is very much a psychedelic. And I now have several other friends that also say that it is a psychedelic. So again, it would be lovely to hear from your experience how do you work with it, and what do you think, what's the best practices also, like, and also do you have challenges because people have used it to escape for a long time, and in the West we know it as a dissociative, numbing kind of substance, and it's not really given that much of a credit. So it would be so interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I love all these different points that you've made, because this is where I start to geek out, right? So I geek out on life in general and this whole process, but cannabis is really unique. And I'm so grateful to have found Daniel and his work through Medicinal Mindfulness, because I was going into his training wanting to facilitate 5-MeO-DMT. And I was like, I need more education on integration. That's why I'm going cannabis. We'll see. And my first ceremony blew me away. I had an experience where I could look down with my eyes closed and see my chakras lit up. My body started to move itself. I had an early childhood memory of someone who grabbed my shoulders and was like, and looked like a dragon, and this experience of feeling like my wings had been broken in that moment. And then my body was like unwinding this trauma that had been held inside of my shoulders and my heart for so long. And I was in ceremony with Daniel maybe a year later, and we looked over at each other. I was holding space, and I was like, this is a somatic psychedelic. It works on the body. And it's so interesting that you were saying, this idea of like a cannabis being a dissociative, because we can do that. There's a strain for that. And when we think of classical psychedelics, we think about set and setting. And when we smoke weed, she's so humble, she allows herself to be called a weed. That when we imbibe cannabis, that if we begin to think about set and setting, all of a sudden we have a different context and a different container. Just like taking something at a festival and going out and partying versus taking it within a ceremonial context. Or even conscious hedonism. We take it with intention and then we go out and play. But we always have that intention to return to, back to the steering wheel to kind of help us navigate the experience. And what if we utilized cannabis in that way? And she is potent, she is gentle, she is sometimes she shakes us. And there's this beautiful phenomenon that happens. You can feel her scanning your body, like you can feel the intelligence of cannabis inside of your body. But sometimes clients will actually start to shake. And Daniel likens that to an alchemical process of purification, where what comes out, when they work with steel, they melt it and they take the steel out and use that, and then what's left is called dross. And so dross is likened to like crystallized trauma that lives in our body. And if you look at Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, talking about how trauma lives in our body, even if it's just a neural pathway, which is a memory, it affects the whole nervous system. So sometimes people who feel, depleted, they have a heavy body. People who have felt crushed, can have a certain way they hold their body. People who feel confident, have a way they hold their body. And so our body really tells us a lot. And Louise Hay, who started Hay House Publications, her life's work was around, the places where our pain or our chronic pain or our dis-ease show up in our body, tells us a lot about the emotional factors that created it. Just like this ovary space, right? Like my body was storing experience rather than being able to feel free and to create from what I was inspired to create. And so that again, that whole process, right? It's like our work becomes our work in the world. And so cannabis has been ayahuasca first, and then cannabis have been my main teachers. And we liken her to the goddess, right? The mother medicine. We imbibe the nectar of her flower to alter our consciousness. I mean, how much more feminine or sexy does it get? She is there with us to help us reparent ourselves. Sometimes she teaches us some hard lessons, and other times she holds us or teaches us how to hold ourselves, gives us our agency back, gives us our power back. You're not just a leaf on the river, like with these bigger medicines going down the rapids. With cannabis, you're in a kayak with an oar and your life vest and your hat, and you're like navigating the rapids, of life, of ceremony. So it's a beautiful medicine to use, especially with people with trauma, because trauma is the experience of too much, too soon, too fast, right? And when we work with cannabis, we can often slow down the experience with our breath, and we can choose, do we want to go left or right? There's choice. And it reminds us that we have power. It reminds us that we have choice. And choice is the thing that makes us human, right? It's our superpower. It's our inherent superpower. Because our attention is the greatest commodity that exists on the planet. Like advertisers aren't looking for your money, they're looking for your attention, because eventually they'll get your money if they have your attention. So where we choose to place our attention is important. And that choice is about the location of that attention. And cannabis allows us to be a witness to that process. And if we want to get super sciencey, THC attaches to the same 5-HT2A serotonin receptors that all classic psychedelics do. So for people who are like, yeah, but it's not a psychedelic, it is, and we've utilized that medicine for generations and millennia as food, as clothing, as medicine, and utilizing it in different forms. And when we imbibe it into our bodies and allow our bodies, we have a whole system in our brain that doesn't attach to anything else except cannabinoids. And it's, some people say, are we even whole or optimized humans without that part of the brain being plugged into with this beautiful ally, this plant. So she's changed my life, and she's changed a lot of people's lives. And Daniel McQueen's work is the process of learning how to work with that medicine, and then how to hold space for other people in that work. And so I'm honored to be a part of the team, helping bring that work into the world. And then, the beauty of what Daniel teaches is that the cannabis work is like a skeletal structure. And then you bring in your modalities and your special magic and your special medicine of who you be to it. So it can be cannabis yoga, it can be cannabis ceremony, it can be cannabis journaling, it can be, right? You can bring in all these different modalities into it. And it's also legal in most states and available now.
Yeah.
We're waiting for MDMA. We're waiting for ayahuasca. We're waiting for LSD to be able to be legal. But we can work with these medicines now, and we're doing that work. And that's the work that I offer in my women's group too. We're working with cannabis as our sacrament online. We're working online. Whereas I wouldn't recommend any other medicine work online. Cannabis, because it's so navigable, you can pause your experience and go to the bathroom and come back and smoke a little more and lay back down. It translates, and it's safe to be able to do online ceremonies. So we're able to support and teach and bring this work out into the whole world. We're an international training program.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all this wisdom. So it's smoked, and how long does it last in a ceremonial space? Is it a group space, or is it just the one-on-one? Like how does it all work out?
Yeah. So usually duration from smoking to feeling pretty sober is about 4 hours. So we usually work within the context of like a 4-hour ceremony. And that is with some orientation at the beginning and some integration at the end. So we joke that it's a 3-hour tour, like Gilligan's Island for the ceremony. And I also like to facilitate just cannabis meditations, which are shorter, usually 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4 puffs, something lighter. But when we facilitate a bigger journey in a larger circle, or one-on-one, you can do it therapeutically one-on-one, akin to the MDMA or psilocybin work that's being done with support beforehand, the ceremony, and then integration after. And you can cycle through that as a healing modality, one-on-one therapeutically, or you can do it within a group context where you're alone together in ceremony, and be able to offer it to wider groups of people, and then process afterwards within community sharing circles after.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Would you say that so if, for example, I'm hearing that the cannabis medicine will respond to the setting. So if it's kind of like a setting where there is going to be a trauma work, for example, and suddenly, these people are feeling the somatic release and shaking and all of the stuff. So I'm guessing understanding or having a training in the somatic therapy modality is going to be super important, because how would you then hold that space for the person who's going through all of these somatic releases, right? So, I feel like there is going to be. I just feel like it's a good match to have that kind of modality, and I can understand why Hakomi training or Alexander. Maybe you want to just kind of tell our guests, listeners, what are these modalities, somatic therapy modalities? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, growing up as a dancer and actor, body is our instrument. And now within the context of, I am a spark of the all that's embodied in this awesome human suit that I get to live this lifetime in. The body, the soma, somatic, right, of the body, and that the process of healing, everything happens through the body, because the body is our instrument. And we're so focused on the mind in Western culture, or just as humans, we have this monkey mind that tries to convince us that that's who we are. But really, again, we have all of this experience that's stored in our body. And if we're able to normalize or get curious about the body, things emerge that we couldn't necessarily talk our way through. Sometimes we need to feel it. And so a lot of the time in somatic work, there's a lot of space and, an invitation to slow down. And a lot of people in our culture are afraid to slow down. That's why we keep ourselves so crazy busy, because maybe we don't like who we are, or what comes up when we do slow down and that inner voice starts to speak. So within the therapeutic context or ceremonial context, we do a lot of quiet and listening and slowing down. And in the one-on-one work, really looking at, what do you notice? Is it a story? Is it a pain in the body? Is it a sensation? Do you see something when you close your eyes? Like what do you notice now? Because if we focus on the now, which is all we really have, if we focus on now, even if we're telling a story about the past, it's like, okay, so as you tell that story about your trauma, say, what do you notice in your body right now? Or I might point out, oh, as you're telling that story, I notice there's a little bit of, playing with the fingers here. What if we took a moment to just focus on that and slow it down and get curious about that? Because often that experience, there might be a story that goes along with it, or a first time that happened, or if we amplify it and just really allow ourselves to be present with it, maybe something else in the body starts to shift and unlock. And I liken it to pulling on a thread and seeing what unravels. And often what unravels, what comes out, is the deep core, the core work. Early childhood, time travel, I call it, where it's like all of a sudden I'm sitting on the bench because my parents forgot to pick me up after school and I feel sad and forgotten, or whatever that story might be. And maybe it came from, maybe I was sitting there picking my nails while I was waiting, So it's really interesting to look at the human experience from more than just our story. Because it is so experiential. Life is an experiential process, and we create meaning from those experiences, right? And often it's either, if it was traumatic, either I was wrong or they were wrong. And then we create a story in a context, and that's how we see ourselves. That's how we see them. That's who my mom is. That's who my dad is. And we have these, they're like shortcuts, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to see my mom. I know she's going to be like this. But what if the reason we see that in her every time is because we're looking for it? And yes, that's a part of her, but it's not all of her. And what if we could, get curious about people and about ourselves and about our stories and about the things that we did in order to get the love we needed, right? Like my story of being a kid and just wanting this love of my father, who gave me just so much love, and like I wanted more, and I'm a curious, participatory, tactile kind of human. Touch is one of my love languages. And so when there's space, my nervous system would get nervous and I would want closeness, to help co-regulate with another person and soothe. And so doing this work just allows us to understand and again be in that compassionate self-inquiry of I do that. I do pick at my nails sometimes, and let me look at that, instead of making myself wrong for the fact that I picked my fingernails. What else could I learn if I just sit and be with that experience, and notice what comes forward? So any trained somatic therapist, any therapist with somatic training, is going to work with not just your stories, which we know time and the retelling of stories, as we know from oral traditions, tends to leave out parts of the story and tends to be very one-sided. And what happens when we just get curious and notice what unfolds and what opens up for us, we might learn something about ourselves, or maybe even the people around us that we think we know. But we might be surprised when we start to contextualize our lives through an expanded vision of what our experiences were. And that's really how we heal trauma. It's not about getting rid of our trauma. It's about recontextualizing it. Like, yes, the trauma happened, and that's not my life anymore. And I see how the perpetrator, maybe I have more compassion for that person now because I understand that they didn't get the love from the person that they needed. And so it was projected onto me in some way.
This is a really great explanation or expression of the somatic, understanding the wisdom of the body and the body language and how we express it. So thank you so much. So much wisdom has you shared with us, and I really appreciate that. As we're coming to the end of our conversation, Skye, what would you like to say to our listeners? And I'm sure we'll have you back very soon and follow your projects and your journey. And as your last words of wisdom, what would you like to say?
Oh yeah, this is always a hard one. It's like, oh gosh. You're not alone, and we're not meant to do it alone, and that community exists, especially in this world of psychedelics where there are a lot of people that feel like an island because their family or their friends or their state, or their country doesn't allow this work, that, the others are out there. And even if it's only online, there are so many integration circles and communities and conversations, podcasts. Get curious, right? Instead of knowing, which creates rigidity and this experience of maybe feeling small in our lives, what is possible when we get curious and start to explore the things that light us up in our lives? These can I curse on your podcast? Am I allowed to say curse? What I always say is, like, follow your fuck yeah. Like, whatever your fuck yeah is, just do that. And if you're not a fuck yeah, then maybe practice, gain some skills in healthy boundaries and learning how to say no, because a no to one thing is a yes to something else. And that there is something possible if we dare to dream it and we dare to see it, and know that community is out there for you and calling, and there with open arms, waiting to receive you. So you don't have to do it alone.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, you don't have to do it alone. There's a lot of people out there. Beautiful. Thank you, Skye, for your time and to be with us. Really appreciating you. And we'll add your bio and all your links in the show notes so that our listeners can find you, connect with you. And we'll see you very soon, hopefully.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let us know, comment below, get in touch with me, Skye, don't be shy, share with us, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much. Bye now. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.